At its surface, The Last Boy Scout plays like a hyper-stylized action film, guns blazing, insults flying, and Bruce Willis walking through fire with a cigarette in his teeth. But peel back a few layers, and the truth isn't so sleek. Behind the wisecracks and explosions lies one of the most chaotic productions of the early 90 seconds, a film born from ego clashes, script mutilation, backroom edits, and a tone so unstable it needed to be patched together in the cutting room. What audiences received was a movie that didn't quite match anyone's vision but somehow survived as something stranger, meaner, and darker than intended. It all began with a screenplay by Shane Black, reportedly soaked in venom and noir cynicism, a tale not just about corrupt sports and broken men, but about how America eats its own. The studio didn't want that, so it bled the script dry, dulled the edges, and left only fragments of the original bitterness behind. What emerged was a Frankenstein, a Tony Scott visual experiment, a Bruce Willis action vehicle, a project that walked the tightrope between satire and sincerity and didn't always land on its feet, and yet something about its fractured energy worked. You can still feel the cuts. You can hear the lines meant for different scenes. You can almost see the movie it wanted to be beneath the one you watched. This isn't just a case of behind-the-scenes tension. It's a case study in how a film survives being sabotaged from within. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Last Boy Scout. Fact 1. The script that broke records and its creator. When Shane Black sold The Last Boy Scout for a staggering $1.75 million, it wasn't just a payday, it was a statement. This was the hottest script in town. A nihilistic, blood-soaked noir disguised as a buddy action movie. Hollywood couldn't wait to get its hands on it, and that's exactly what went wrong. Almost immediately, studio interference kicked in. Black's original draft, dark, blisteringly cynical, and loaded with subtext, was deemed too mean, too bleak, too smart for its genre. Rewrites followed, some done by Black under pressure, others commissioned behind his back. Scenes were softened, themes dulled, and humor dialed up. The set became a pressure cooker. Black clashed with producers. The story shifted daily. Key lines vanished without explanation. Entire characters were rewritten mid-shoot. Black, once celebrated, became sidelined. Despite the record-breaking sale, he later admitted the experience was soul-draining. He wouldn't write another script for 6 years. They didn't just change the film, he said, they strangled it. Ironically, the most expensive spec script of its era became a warning, not an inspiration. This wasn't just a sale, it was a slow-motion creative collapse. Fact 2. The cut the director never approved. Tony Scott had a vision. It wasn't the studio's. After months of shooting under mounting tension, Scott submitted his cut of The Last Boy Scout, a grim, stylized, and jagged film that leaned into its darkness. The studio watched it once and made a decision. Cut it again, quietly, without him. Executives feared the movie was too bleak, too weird, and too niche, so they ordered their own internal team to re-edit it. Scenes tying Joe Hallenbeck's backstory to the villain's motives were chopped. Subplots involving political corruption vanished. Emotional beats were replaced with punchlines. Scott learned of the betrayal at a private screening. He reportedly sat in stunned silence before walking out. He never publicly acknowledged the film again. Interviews later mentioned it only in passing, never with pride. The director's cut became a ghost. Whispers of alternate scenes and early test versions circulate among fans, but no official version has ever surfaced. What remains is a sleek product with rough edges showing through. A film recut not for clarity, but for control. Fact 3. Co-stars with chemistry and contempt. They're electric on screen. Off-screen, barely civil. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans brought the snark and swagger that powered The Last Boy Scout. But behind the camera, the relationship was anything but playful. From day one, they clashed over lines, delivery, even who got the last word in a scene. Wayans felt pushed aside. Willis treated him like a supporting act. The tension bled into rehearsals and spilled into production. One shouting match over a line rewrite led to Wayans walking off set for hours. Crew morale plummeted. Tony Scott had to broker peace just to keep the day on schedule. Watch closely and you'll see it. Physical distance in their blocking, cold glances that don't quite match the banter. Some say the friction added realism. Others say it nearly tore the film apart. Plans for a sequel were scrapped, not for lack of interest, but because neither actor was willing to return if the other did. The fire you saw on screen? It wasn't acting. Fact 4. An ending so hopeless, it had to be buried. Shane Black's original conclusion to The Last Boy Scout didn't feature last-minute heroics or victorious grins. It was quiet, bitter, and brutal. In early drafts, the villain gets away. Hallenbeck fails. The senator dies. The final image? A battered Joe, alone in the rain, muttering to no one, just another broken man lost in a system that eats its own. Test audiences hated it. The studio panicked and ordered rewrites. The new ending was bigger, louder, and more optimistic. A football toss, a helicopter fight, a dead villain. Everything wrapped up cleanly, or so it seemed. But remnants of that original finale still haunt the movie. Abrupt tonal shifts, odd cuts, a climax that feels like it belongs to a different story. Editors stitched together scenes not originally meant to connect. There's no official footage of the darker version, but those who worked on it say it was haunting. Too haunting, perhaps, for a movie sold as popcorn entertainment. In its place, we got comfort, but the shadow of what could have been never really left. Fact 5. A body count built to break records. Violence in The Last Boy Scout wasn't an accident. It was a marketing strategy. Internal memos from Warner Brothers reportedly pushed for more action, more mayhem, more blood. They wanted to set a new standard in on-screen carnage. Tony Scott obliged. By the time the credits rolled, nearly 90 people had been shot, stabbed, or blown apart. Many of those deaths weren't essential to the plot. They were added to boost adrenaline. Extras were dispatched in waves. Some scenes were reshot just to increase impact. One crew member joked the film had more bodies than dialogue. Critics raised eyebrows. Audiences cheered. The result was a film that straddled the line between genre homage and violent satire. It didn't just tell a story. It left one behind in chalk outline. Fact 6. The league you saw was a legal illusion. There's football all over The Last Boy Scout, but none of it came from the NFL. That's because the real league refused to be involved. The script's depiction of drug-fueled players, game fixing, and violent cover-ups was deemed too toxic by NFL lawyers. They warned the studio against any association, so the production improvised. Fake teams, fabricated logos, invented stadium signage. The costumes looked authentic, the plays were real, but everything else? Smoke and mirrors. And yet, the film still name-drops real NFL franchises, just enough to blur the line between fiction and reality. It was a risky move, but a calculated one. Enough to give the illusion of authenticity, not enough to get sued. The end result is surreal. It feels like the real league, but through a cracked mirror. Fact 7. The director was told to stop making it look cool. Tony Scott had a look stylized, moody, full of shadows and streaks of neon. But halfway through production on The Last Boy Scout, he was pulled aside and told bluntly, cut the music video stuff. Producer Joel Silver wasn't impressed. He felt Scott's visual flourishes were distracting from the action, making the movie look too artistic for its own good. The camera moves, the backlighting, the slow pans through smoke, it wasn't what they wanted. Scott didn't back down. He kept pushing his signature aesthetic, even as pressure mounted to simplify the visual style. Some scenes were relit, others were toned down in post, but many of his choices remained intact, just buried under studio-mandated edits. The final film carries the tension between Scott's cinematic instincts and the studio's commercial demands. It doesn't always mesh, but it never looks boring. What survives is a compromise, a beautiful one. Fact 10. The shocking opener was an afterthought. That unforgettable opening rain pounding, the football game turning deadly. A player pulling a gun mid-play wasn't part of the plan. In fact, it was added after the rest of the film had already been shot. Executives felt the movie lacked a visceral hook, something that screamed danger from the first frame. The original first act didn't test well, so they asked for a cold open that would leave the audience breathless. Tony Scott hesitated. Shane Black objected outright, but the studio insisted. Within days, a new sequence was written, a stadium set was rebuilt, and cameras rolled. The result is one of the film's most talked about scenes, a surreal, brutal prologue that barely connects to the rest of the narrative. But it sets the tone for everything that follows. Nothing is safe, and no one gets out clean. It wasn't supposed to start like this, but it couldn't have started any other way. Fact 11. It swore more than any studio action film before it. Profanity wasn't just seasoning in The Last Boy Scout. It was the rhythm of the film's heartbeat. Shane Black's script was already foul-mouthed. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans added their own spice. The result? A film that, at the time, held the record for most F-bombs in a major studio action movie. Over 100 instances, not counting creative variations. The MPAA threatened an NC-17 rating unless the language was toned down. But Warner Brothers pushed back, arguing that the film's violent world required a violent vocabulary. They won. The rating stuck. The language remained intact. Critics called it excessive. Fans memorized every insult. And the profanity? It became a character of its own. This wasn't style over substance. This was style as substance. They won. The rating stuck. The language remained intact. The rooftop climax between Hallenbeck and Milo was meant to be longer, more brutal, more physical, more personal. But one accident changed everything. During a night shoot, Milo's stunt double slipped on the rain-slick rig and fell hard into the steel framework. 2 ribs cracked. Shooting stopped. With insurance costs rising and the schedule tightening, the creative team had no choice but to simplify the sequence. The fight became shorter, cleaner, less chaotic. Milo's death was sped up. Emotional beats were sacrificed for safety. Viewers have long commented that the ending feels abrupt. The tension breaks too fast. The fall lacks weight, but they weren't watching a failed scene. They were watching the cost of pushing too far. Sometimes, the edit room hides a scar. Other times, it preserves it. Fact 13. She was supposed to matter much more. Halle Berry's role in The Last Boy Scout is short, sharp, and ends in a hail of bullets. But that was never the plan. Originally, her character Corey had a much larger presence. Scenes were filmed showing her navigating the sleazy underworld she danced in, pleading with Jimmy Dix to get clean, and confronting the dangers closing in on her. She wasn't just a catalyst, she was a person. But in post-production, time became the enemy. Early cuts dragged. The studio wanted pace. Emotional beats were sacrificed. Corey's arc was the first to go. Berry later mentioned in interviews that she shot far more than what made it to screen. Her disappointment was evident but not bitter. "It's part of the game," she said. But she was more than just a victim. Watch the film now, and her death feels hollow. But in an earlier version, it shattered everything. Fact 14. The scene that even Joel Silver rejected. Nothing seemed too far for The Last Boy Scout, until one moment crossed a line. A torture sequence filmed but never released involved Joe Hallenbeck being brutalized by rogue cops. No music, just screams, sweat, and a slow, cruel monologue delivered over the sound of cracking bone. Tony Scott filmed it in near darkness, with tight shots and no cuts. Shane Black thought it was one of the film's rawest moments, but when Joel Silver saw it, he shut it down. "We're not making Midnight Express," he reportedly snapped. "Take it out." The footage vanished. It's not on DVD extras, not in leaked reels, not even in official archives. Those who saw it say it was unforgettable. Maybe that's why no one's allowed to see it again. Fact 15. A real gun almost ended everything. The moment should have been routine. A close-up of a character pointing a pistol. The camera rolls. Bruce Willis reacts. But that day, something felt off. The gun was heavier than expected. Willis paused. The weapons supervisor checked. Inside the barrel, a live round. The firearm had been switched during setup. A real gun ended up in the actor's hands. The result could have been catastrophic. Production halted immediately. Safety procedures were rewritten on the spot. The prop master was let go. Every weapon on set was double-checked and locked down. The story never made headlines. It was buried by NDAs and internal memos. But it shook the crew. What was supposed to be just another day became a brush with disaster. On a film built on fake violence, this was the moment it nearly became real. Fact 16. A tagline that was never meant to be used. "It's just a game. You think you're tough enough?" That was the line plastered across posters and VHS covers for The Last Boy Scout. But few people know where it came from or how accidental it really was. The story goes that a Warner Brothers executive, under pressure and running out of time, stayed late in his office, poured himself a drink, and started jotting down potential taglines at 3 a.m. Most of them were discarded. One ended up in marketing materials by default. No brainstorming sessions, no brand strategy, just one man, one bottle, and one late-night email. Even the cast didn't take it seriously. When asked about the line during a press junket, Bruce Willis reportedly laughed and said, "I didn't write it," but somehow it stuck. And decades later, it's still attached to the film, awkward, aggressive, and weirdly fitting. Not all branding is intentional. Sometimes, it's just desperation with good timing. Fact 17. The most chilling line was pure improvisation. Milo doesn't scream. He whispers. He smiles. And then he kills. His most quoted line, "Touch me again, and I'll kill you, and I'll do it slow," wasn't in the script. Taylor Negron, the actor behind Milo, added it on the spot during filming. He believed villains were scarier when they didn't try too hard. Tony Scott kept the take. It was too good to lose. It became one of the film's most memorable lines, repeated in fan circles for years. Negron later said he based the character on someone real, a man who was too calm, too polite, and too quiet to be trusted. That single line, unscripted and soft, did more to define Milo than all the gunplay combined. Terror doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it just speaks clearly. Fact 18. The rain was real and relentless. Los Angeles doesn't usually see that much rain, but during the production of The Last Boy Scout, the skies wouldn't let up. Instead of fighting it, Tony Scott embraced it. The wet streets, slick pavement, and soaked characters weren't effects, they were weather, and they caused chaos. Equipment shorted, cameras fogged, sound gear failed mid-take. One lighting rig nearly collapsed under the weight of a soaked tarp. Insurance refused to pay for weather-related damages. Crew members scrambled to cover gear with plastic sheeting and duct tape. They nicknamed the shoot Waterlogged Die Hard. Still, Scott refused to stop. He believed the rain gave the movie a texture it needed, grit, grime, and a sense that the world itself was closing in. Most directors chase style in post-production. Scott found it in the forecast. Fact 19. The screenwriter inserted himself into the movie. Some cameos are celebratory. This one was personal. In one of the stadium crowd scenes late in The Last Boy Scout, a man in dark glasses and a baseball cap appears briefly in the background, arms crossed, unmoving. That man? Shane Black, the writer of the film. According to crew accounts, Black showed up on set unexpectedly after his script had been heavily rewritten. He wasn't invited, he wasn't needed, but instead of sending him away, someone handed him a pass and said, "Just blend in." He didn't say a word on camera, didn't smile, didn't look at the leads. He just stood there, watching. It wasn't a cameo, it was a ghost of what the movie could have been. Fact 20. Audiences rejected it until they didn't. The first test screenings were brutal. People walked out. Survey cards were filled with words like mean, spirited, confusing, and no heart. Executives considered delaying the release or dumping the film to home video. Then came the second screening. New crowd, new energy. This time, the audience erupted with laughter, cheered the violence, and quoted lines as they left the theater. The film hadn't changed, but the viewers had. Joel Silver recognized what had happened. The movie didn't belong in the mainstream. It wasn't for everyone. It was a cult film, scrappy, angry, uneven, but unforgettable. So the marketing shifted, the weirdness was embraced, the controversy leaned into. It didn't need everyone to love it, it just needed the right people to never forget it. Bonus fact, the film accidentally predicted a real-life scandal. When The Last Boy Scout depicted football executives fixing games, bribing politicians, and manipulating gambling systems, most people rolled their eyes. It was just movie nonsense, right? Fast forward a dozen years, and headlines began to blur the line. Investigations into NFL betting irregularities, hush money settlements, and unethical franchise dealings began surfacing. Nothing ever stuck, but for those who remembered the film, the similarities were too sharp to ignore. Suddenly, that villainous monologue, "You control the game, you control the people," didn't sound so theatrical. It's unclear if Shane Black stumbled into prophecy or just understood the nature of unchecked systems. But The Last Boy Scout stopped sounding like fiction and started feeling like a warning. What if this movie's mess wasn't its flaw, but its fingerprint? Let us know in the comment. Which of these hidden facts changed how you see The Last Boy Scout? And do you think the chaos made it better or buried something great? If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit subscribe and tell us which forgotten film deserves the same treatment, because the stories they tried to hide are the ones worth remembering.